Hello, we are in gate 9 and we have a third line, which is called the straw that breaks the camel's back. Colloquialisms are a funny thing, really, because if you don't know what they mean, you don't know what they mean. It's kind of like what to do. It's not necessarily an easy thing to explain. But what this is telling us is that there is an enormous amount of focusing that could be done by this third line. But there is a point at which the whole thing collapses. Bonds made and broken. This is obviously the trial and error coming out in this line. The lifetime learning says the overlooked minor element that always predetermines failure. The third line is an archetype. This 9-3, much like the 42-3, actually. And whenever you see the word failure or mistake in a third line, it's okay, because this is exactly where it is supposed to be. It doesn't mean there's anything terrible about it. It just means that for certain, in this third line, this process of bonds made and broken and trial and error of learning from mistakes is going to be accentuated. The third line has the ability, to a point, to focus, but if it can't sit still, it's never going to focus long enough. Not long enough to get the essential detail that is missing, without which nothing's going to work. This is the person who arrives at the airport without their passport. There is a lot of power here, potentially. These third lines can really focus over and over again because they have to, because they keep on bumping into situations where they have to. But if they don't have the capacity to be still and finish the process, then it doesn't work. And of course, a lot of that's going to be dependent on who the other is that they're banging into and whether they're going into it correctly. If they are, then they will get the right kinds of relationships for them to focus, because this is what they need in order to share, because this is collective. It's all about sharing. The right kind of relationship for them will help them focus and will help them to share whatever it is they're concentrating on. So in the exaltation, we have the use of force to temporarily overcome impediments, the loss of power through the failure to focus. So in other words, the moment that something is not working in the concentration, they throw a whole load more concentration on it. This is the power to try to go through things without having all the detail. These people are often taking shortcuts. They're skipping a little bit. And again, it has to do with who is in their life and how they entered into that relationship as a collective process. In the detriment, persistent force that saps vitality and turns molehills into mountains. The power to turn focus into an obsession. The third line here, with the bonds made and broken, it keeps on trying to get all the detail. Bumping into someone here and trying to get it, and bumping into somebody else there. It keeps on trying to get all the detail with different people, and it doesn't work. The detail that they're looking for becomes their holy grail. If only I can find this detail, then I've got it. And so they become obsessed with it. And yet these are people who will always miss something. There is always a moment in which their concentration breaks. There is a moment that the concentration is simply not there. And in that moment, they can take a wrong turn and go on a huge detour. In that moment, they could just literally miss what is right there. And what is missed can become an enormous thing. Turning mountains into molehills is something that is only there when they are not clear in terms of who they're dealing with. Because this is collective. And wherever you see the 9-3, you're seeing the need for collective verification. It's good for the 9-3 to do their homework with somebody else, because the detail that they might miss, the other will find. And if they're sitting with someone who's just like them, someone who's not interested in the detail, or someone who can't still sit still like they can, then they can end up with a lot of frustration. Because this is a sacral gate. Don't forget, there's a lot of power here. And of course, anytime a sacral gate is not using its power correctly, frustration is going to be the result. It is the logic process that makes the word mistake ugly. Abstract people don't care about mistakes. Crisis is part of their way of life. But logical people, they get very upset with mistakes. You know, 1 and 1 is not 2, but 3. No, it's 2. And it's the whole process. If that's a mistake, you're going to have to go and correct that. And it can be quite, I mean, logic is really critical. It's a very, very critical circuit. It has to be right. Logic has to be right because the logic process has to be consistently provable for the collective to take it seriously. Making a mistake in the logic process can create a lot of really deep anxiety in logical people because the very nature of logic is to eliminate the mistakes so that we can know for certain. What is this formula E equals mc squared? Let's make it certain. We'd better check that out. Otherwise, we're going to scratch it because if we can't put that out into the world and verify it and predict it into the future, then everything could just, turn to shit. We're not going there. Everything has to be verified and verifiable. What happens here in the third line is the miracle of what logic always needs. Logic always needs the illogic of a mistake because out of this can come so many wonders. That moment when there is something that is missed, the moment that everything breaks down and is a failure, that's the moment that can actually be an enormous success. A classic example of the scientist who loses their concentration for a moment, something gets too hot and explodes, and out of that explosion comes something wonderful. It's like, wow, that is amazing. How did that happen? Totally illogical. And of course, because it's totally illogical, it makes it really uncomfortable. This is lower trigram. That's why there's this straw breaking the camel's back, because they don't have the transpersonal skills. They don't know that there's a 52 who can sit with them and say, okay, let's just work this out together. There's no need to panic. We don't have to chase after things. Just sit down here with me and the two of us can work this out together. Low trigram, they don't know that. They don't know that's a possibility. And of course, the third line finds this out quicker than the first or the second lines because it's the nature of the third line to bump into things. You miss the details that might make life easier for you, but that doesn't matter. There'll be somebody, you'll bump into somebody who's going to help you. Ra used the example of, and I don't know if it's true, but he used the example of the doors are lower in Spain. And so it's very easy to hit your head. If you don't know that detail, it can actually really physically hurt. So if you were getting off the aeroplane and some kind collective person took you to one side and said, by the way, the doors in Spain, they're only 5 foot tall. They're filling in those gaps in your detail, which are then going to be really useful for you. And it's different when you get to the fourth line because of their transpersonal capacity. And the transpersonal is rooted in the collective. We have 3 different ways in which we can express geometry. The lower trigram is about destiny. It's a personal destiny. And so it's always self-involved. In terms of profiles, 7 of the 12 profiles are personal destiny. If you have a right angle profile, right angle cross rather, sorry, if you're on a right angle cross, then this is you. And so it may be your personal destiny to miss the detail, but that's not collective destiny. Where the collective is rooted in the transpersonal, these would be the left angles. So this is about karma. And while it may be your personal destiny to make mistakes, it might be someone else's karma to come along and save you. Probably with a practical solution, because the 5-1, as you could probably guess, is a left angle configuration. At the end of the fourth line, we have the juxtaposition, and this is where we have a fixed fate, which can be both personal destiny or and transpersonal karma. Could be anything. It's a fixed fate. This transpersonal gift that I talk about when I get into the upper trigram, and I mention it most times, this is fifth and sixth lines really that we're returning, because the 4 is on the cusp. So the 5 and 6 are the lines of transpersonal karma, and their process is deeply interwoven with the geometry of others, as is the 4th line. I mean, very often we talk about how the 4th line needs others, it needs its network, it's very friendly, and yet it's also very fixed. And it has its relationship to that first line, that foundation where it digs in. So these are all the sort of interesting little mechanics that come through. Geeky. The grounding is coming from the earth in gate 16 in the 3rd line of independence. Yeah, independence. So it's pretty hard to be independent in a circuit that demands sharing. Well, and it's hard to be independent when you have a hanging gate and you need the other end to bring you the completion of the channel, to release the energy and bring that full power of concentration and focus so that you can sit still, so you can go step by step through the detail and not miss anything. But sometimes not having something is the lesson. It's not about finding the completion, but learning about what it's like not to have that consistently. And then when it does come along, there's a better chance of recognizing whether it's the correct 52, in example. You know, whether that specific 52 that comes into your aura, are they the right one for you? And you can only learn that through a certain amount of experimentation. And as a 3rd line, of course, you're going to bump in and find out whether or not it's correct, whether it works, whether it doesn't. But it's just learning that just because I haven't got it, I don't have to keep reaching for it. It will come naturally. Venus moved into gate 29 at 7:30 this morning, the abysmal, the gate of saying yes, the sacral gate that is in the abstract circuit and is about saying yes to the discovery of a new experience. Now, it's not about directing the experience or controlling the experience, but saying yes and seeing what comes next. So the moon has been in a channel with Uranus since 253, the 1-8, the individual channel of inspiration between the G center and the throat. It next moves into gate 43 at 1403. More individuality. And we know this pattern now. The sun is moving through it as it transits this quarter of mutation. Gate 43 is in the Ajna, and it's the gate of insight and breakthrough, holding the possibility of the expression of inspiration and inspirational thoughts when gate 23 is there, bringing that definition to the throat. And then gate 14, the moon shifts into gate 14 at 1:07 tomorrow morning, the gate of power skills, possession in great measure, the gate of the wagon full of resources. This is a sacral gate, a lot of power here, of course, and it's looking for the correct 2nd gate to channel it to, to give its fuel to, the right driver to give its juice to. That's the 3rd line. Thank you very much for joining me. I will be back with the 4th line tomorrow. And until then, as always, very gently.